Hello friends, welcome to my course on microbial biotechnology. Today we are starting module number 8 on environmental biotechnology, where we will start with a lecture on microbial ecology and biogeochemical cycles. So briefly, we have three broad sections over here with a background and introduction. Then we will have an overview of biogeochemical cycles and also study some of them in detail. Then we will also discuss about the role of microbes in biogeochemical cycles. So the term biogeochemical encompasses three key aspects. Number one is the biological, second is the geological, and third is the chemical. Biological involves living organisms and their interactions with ecosystems. Geologicals pertain to the Earth's physical structure and processes, including the formation and weathering of rocks. The chemical relates to the chemical transformations and reactions that elements undergo within the cycle. To start with a definition, biogeochemical cycles are the natural processes that recycle nutrients and elements through Earth's atmosphere, hydrosphere, lithosphere, and the biosphere. These cycles involve the movement and transformation of chemical elements between living organisms, the biotic components, and the non-living environment, the abiotic components, ensuring the continuous availability of essential nutrients necessary for life. They are crucial for maintaining ecological balance and supporting the growth and survival of all living beings. So what is the importance of biogeochemical cycles? So we will be discussing them one by one under different heads. One of the most important aspect of biogeochemical cycle is the nutrient recycling. Then it also helps in water purification, maintains soil fertility, it supports biodiversity, protects the environment, it plays a huge role in climate regulation, and overall it supports life and maintains a balance of the ecosystem. When it comes to nutrient recycling, which we will be discussing a little bit in more detail, biogeochemical cycles recycle essential nutrients, ensuring their continuous availability for living organisms. They balance the ecosystem by maintaining ecological balance through regulating the flow of elements like carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and water. They support life. These cycles are fundamental for supporting plant growth and sustaining all forms of life on Earth. They also regulate the climate by playing a role in Earth's climate by influencing atmospheric composition and greenhouse gas levels. They contribute to soil fertility, which is vital for agricultural productivity and food security. Certain cycles like the water cycle in particular aid in purifying water resources through natural processes such as filtration and evaporation. They protect the environment. Understanding these cycles is crucial for addressing environmental issues like pollution, climate change, and habitat destruction, enabling the development of sustainable practices. They also support biodiversity. They promote diversity, biological diversity by creating and maintaining diverse habitats and ecosystems. We can divide the biogeochemical cycles into three broad types. One are the gaseous cycles comprising of carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen. Then we have the sedimentary cycles, phosphorus, sulfur, calcium, and iron. Then we have the hydrological cycle, mostly the water cycle, which comprise of the solid, ice, the liquid, and the vapor phase. So we will discuss some of these in this lecture today. So let's start with the gaseous cycles overall. The carbon cycle, carbon dioxide is absorbed by plants during photosynthesis, which is known to you. Also certain photosynthetic bacteria. They move through the food chain and returns to the atmosphere via respiration, decomposition, and combustion. Then there is the nitrogen cycle, where atmospheric nitrogen is converted into usable forms like ammonia and nitrates by bacteria, used by plants and animals, and returned to the atmosphere through denitrification, where microbes are involved. Then there is the oxygen cycle. This is produced by plants during photosynthesis, used by organisms for respiration, and returned to the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. Then there are the sedimentary cycles where phosphorus is released from rocks through the process of weathering. These are absorbed by plants, transferred through the food chain and returned to the soil through decomposition. Then we have the sulfur cycle, which is again released from rocks, assimilated by plants and microbes, passed through the food chain and returned to the environment through decomposition and microbial processes. Calcium moves between the earth's crust, water bodies and living organisms, essential for bone formation and cell wall stabilization. The iron cycles between the earth's crust, oceans and living organisms. It is crucial for oxygen transport in blood and as a nutrient for plants and microorganisms. The water cycle is crucial for all life forms, involving the movement of water through various reservoirs, liquid water in rivers, lakes and oceans, ice in glaciers and polar caps, and water vapor in the atmosphere. It transports nutrients and supports biogeochemical cycles through processes like precipitation, evaporation and runoff, which are all essential for the ecosystem health. So, here we see two figures where one shows us the ecosystem services and the other one shows us the ecosystem disservices. So, this is a theoretical representation of the main biogeochemical flows, then the intermediate and final ecosystem services connected to a healthy ecosystem structure. So, this one is a healthy ecosystem structure and this is a damaged ecosystem structure. So, let us try to understand these two theoretical framework. So, we have biogeochemical cycles as represented by carbon, nitrogen and water over here in both the damaged ecosystem as well as the healthy ecosystem. So, the healthy ecosystem structure will support carbon dioxide sequestration and it will also help in biological fixation and of course, the percolation. But in a damaged ecosystem, it will actually result in carbon dioxide emission. Then there is leaching and runoff and there is also surface runoff of all the important nutrients which we have discussed. So, as a result of these, the final outcome in a healthy ecosystem is positive. We have very positive climate regulation, there is enhanced food production, better soil formation and soil with healthy properties, then there is sufficient water supply and the flood is also controlled. And there are many other such positive ecosystem services. But in a damaged ecosystem structure, which may happen due to anthropogenic activities or even certain natural calamities, it leads to climate change because, for example, you consuming more fossil fuels which is releasing greenhouse gases or due to the industrialization process which is not green. Then because the ecosystem is damaged, it will not be able to produce enough food. So, there will be food scarcity and even result in famine. And then there will be soil erosion, for example, due to deforestation, the soil will be impacted very badly. There will be water scarcity and there will be erratic flooding from time to time and there is also some kind of erratic rainfall which we can see in climate change and extreme weather events. So, from these two comparisons we understand that a healthy balance of the biogeochemical cycle is very, very important in maintaining the health of the ecosystem, which will be able to provide us better ecosystem services. And if we fail to maintain that, it actually results in ecosystem disservice and this can ruin many nations. So, it is in our interest, we need to understand these biogeochemical cycles and the intricate balance in nature among the various cycles. So, let us now go to section 2 where we will have a overview of the biogeochemical cycles which we have mentioned very briefly in the earlier slides. So, water cycle comprises of evaporation due to the heating of water bodies by the sun or solar energy. Water molecules will rise from them into the atmosphere, which is known to you, and there will be condensation as the water vapor moves into higher altitudes. It will cool down and it will form droplets and ice, and it will also create clouds. Then finally, they will precipitate. The water droplets coalesce and fall as rain when conditions are favorable, attaching to dust or impurities. Then these water seeps into soil layers. Soil retains more water than rocks. Then there may be runoff. Water flows downhill, forming rivers and streams if not absorbed into the aquifers. Then there is the carbon cycle, where due to photosynthesis, the plants and photosynthetic microorganisms absorb carbon from the atmosphere and fix it, and actually carbon dioxide. Then these are consumed by animals, and they incorporate the carbon into their bodies. So the flow of carbon from atmosphere through the plant body by the process of photosynthesis to the animal happen by these pathway in this cycle. And when these organisms die, they decompose. There will be microbes which will decompose to release the carbon back into the atmosphere, and then some may also result in the fossil fuel formation. Some carbon is converted into fossil fuels, releasing more carbon when burned for energy. And such events have occurred in the past, history of our planet, and the fossil fuel that we are using today are a result of this kind of reactions. Then there is the oxygen cycle, which is closely related to the photosynthetic process of the carbon cycle. The green plants release oxygen into the atmosphere, and then there is respiration, where this oxygen will be used. Particularly the aerobic organisms inhale oxygen for the metabolic processes, and the animals exhale the carbon dioxide, which is used by plants in photosynthesis. Then we have the nitrogen cycle, sulfur cycle, and the phosphorus cycle. Nitrogen basically exists as a gas in the atmosphere, which is converted to ammonia by symbiotic bacteria, and then some of them also are done fixed by natural methods, which we will discuss in some of the slides later. The primary producers then absorb nitrogen compounds from soil for protein formation, and then there is ammonification, where decomposition releases nitrogen back into the soil as ammonia, and then there is nitrification, where ammonia is oxidized to nitrates by bacteria, making it less harmful for plants. And finally, there will be also denitrification, where nitrogen compounds are converted back to atmospheric nitrogen by specific bacteria. In the sulfur cycle, decomposition occurs on the dead matter. So these organic matter releases sulfur containing amino acids converting to hydrogen sulfide, where microbes like bacteria are involved, and then they are oxidized. Hydrogen sulfide is oxidized to elemental sulfur by specific bacteria, and further elemental sulfur is converted to sulfates, which can be taken up by plants. And then there is a reduction where sulfates are reduced back to hydrogen sulfide by bacteria. Then we have the phosphorus cycle. Phosphorus, unlike nitrogen, do not exist in the gaseous form. It is existing in the rocks. The phosphate salts in rocks are broken down and washed into the ground. They are absorbed by plants after they get dissolved, and then we may also put external supply of phosphorus by means of fertilizer application. Then these are obtained by animals by consuming plants and or other animals, and then these are decomposed organisms, plants and animals release phosphorus back into the soil, and this continues the cycle or close the loop. Let us discuss a little bit more about the nitrogen cycle. All organisms require nitrogen because it is an important component of nucleic acids, proteins, and many other organic molecules. But since it exists in gaseous form, it is difficult to get nitrogen into living organisms easily. Plants and algae are not equipped to incorporate nitrogen from the atmosphere, where it exists as tightly bonded triple covalent. Although these molecules comprise approximately 78% of the atmosphere. Because most of the nitrogen is stored in the atmosphere is considered as a reservoir of nitrogen. The nitrogen molecule is therefore quite inert. So, as it has a triple bond as mentioned, to break it apart these bonds, so that its atoms can combine with other atoms require the input of substantial amount of energy. So, here we can see that nitrogen in the atmosphere, which is quite high, close to around 80%, 78%, then in spite of being abundant, it is not easily or readily available to be absorbed by plants and algae. So, these are mediated by the presence of certain bacteria, which we call as nitrogen fixers. So, these atmospheric nitrogen can be fixed and then converted into nitrate, and then they are further converted by nitrifying bacteria into nitrite and ammonia, and then they finally become available to these organism. Then there are also certain denitrifying microbes which will release these nitrates back into the atmosphere. So, in this way the nitrogen is recycled between the atmosphere and the biosphere with the help of bacteria, both in fixing it and releasing it. So, some major transformations in the nitrogen cycle. This cycle we have discussed earlier in some of the slides briefly. So, these atmospheric nitrogen is getting fixed and then producing ammonia, which is oxidized, and then further production of the nitrite, which is further oxidized, and then due to denitrifying bacteria it is again getting released. So, there are two other important pathways in this cycle, the anammox and also the ammonification. So, we will be starting about these various arms of these cycle in detail. So, nitrogen fixation is therefore a process of converting nitrogen gas into ammonia, which spontaneously becomes ammonium. It is found in bodies of water and also in the soil, and we can see the chemical reaction of nitrogen fixation where nitrogen gas reacts with 8 hydrogen ions and with the presence of 8 electrons and converted into ammonia and hydrogen. However, there are 3 processes which help in fixing this nitrogen in the biosphere from the atmosphere. So, number one is the atmospheric fixation. This is a natural process. The other one is the biological fixation. That is also a natural process where biotic components are involved. And then there is a man-made process, which is the industrial nitrogen fixation. Let us study them one by one. So, as we have discussed, it is very difficult to break the nitrogen molecule into atoms, and it requires a very high energy. So, these energy in the atmosphere comes from the lightning, which breaks down the nitrogen molecule, and thereby it enables the atoms to combine with oxygen in the atmosphere to form nitrogen oxides. These oxides dissolve in rain, forming nitrates, which are then carried to the earth along with the precipitation. The atmospheric nitrogen fixation through lightning is estimated to contribute about 5 to 8% of the total nitrogen fixed globally. So, whenever there is a thunderstorm or lightning, actually although it is dangerous and it may be fatal to trees and man, human and animals, it carries out a important ecosystem service of converting nitrogen into nitrogen oxides and thereby also dissolving along with the rainwater and falling into earth in the form of nitrates, and these account for around 5 to 8% of the total nitrogen fixed globally. Now, to fix this much of nitrogen in the atmosphere, we will really need very large industries if we want to do it artificially, because in the industrial fixation of nitrogen, we need very high pressure, 150 to 300 atmospheric pressures, and very high temperatures around 400 to 500 degrees centigrades, and also we need certain catalyst where atmospheric nitrogen and hydrogen can be combined to form ammonia, while ammonia can be used directly as a fertilizer. Most of it is further it processed into compounds like urea and ammonium nitrate for ease of agricultural use. So, we can see that this is a very, very expensive process. Then there is a third process of nitrogen fixation, where certain free living or symbiotic bacteria are capable of nitrogen fixation. Some of these bacteria form symbiotic relationship with plants in the legume family, like the peas and beans, and then through the root nodules, while others form symbiotic relationship with animals such as the nitrogen fixing bacteria in the gut of termites. So, the nitrogen fixing cyanobacteria, blue-green algae are also vital to maintaining the fertility of semi-aquatic environments such as in the rice fields, where they fix nitrogen in the water as well as the aquatic phase. So, this table lists some of the prokaryotes which are known to carry out nitrogen fixation. So, majority of them are, as you can see, bacteria, and they are mostly free living and aerobic and phototropic, but there are also certain archaea which are free living, anaerobic and chemolithotropic, like Methanosarcina and Methanococcus. Then we have also bacteria which are free living but anaerobic phototropic, like Chromatium, Chlorobium, and then we have also Clostridium. Then we have Rhizobia and Frankia, which are symbiotic, aerobic, chemo-organotropic microorganisms which carry out nitrogen fixation. So, Nostoc are cyanobacteria which are free living and aerobic and phototropic, whereas Pseudomonas azotobacter are free living aerobic chemo-organotropic bacteria that fixes nitrogen. Nitrogen assimilation. Primary producers absorb nitrogen compounds from soil for protein formation. Then there is ammonification, where decomposition releases nitrogen back into soil as ammonia. In nitrification, ammonia is oxidized to nitrates by bacteria like Nitrosomonas, Nitrosospira and Nitrosococcus, and it thereby reduces the harmfulness of the compound for plants. The chemical reaction for nitrification, you can see this is ammonia which is getting oxidized, and then also in the next step this is reacting with water to release the nitrates. So, overall reaction 1 convert ammonia to intermediate hydroxylamine, and this is catalyzed by one enzyme called ammonia monooxygenase, and then this hydroxylamine is converted to nitrite by an enzyme hydroxylamine oxidoreductase in step 2. The second step in nitrification is the oxidation of nitrite to nitrate, and here we can see that one nitrite molecule is reacting with half oxygen to produce one nitrate compound. This is carried out by completely separate group of prokaryotes which are known as nitrate oxidizing bacteria like Nitrospira, Nitrobacter, Nitrococcus and Nitrospina. Then comes denitrification, which involves 2 steps. The first reaction represents the reduction of nitrate to dinitrogen gas, and then second step represents the complete redox reaction of denitrification. So, here the nitrogen compounds are converted back to atmospheric nitrogen by specific bacteria like Bacillus, Paracoccus and Pseudomonas. Anamox, basically anaerobic ammonia oxidation, is carried out by prokaryotes belonging to Plantomycetes, which is a phylum of bacteria. This is first described in the bacterium Brocadia anamodixans. These Anamox bacteria oxidize ammonia by using nitrite as the electron acceptor to produce gaseous nitrogen. So, here you can see the chemical reaction of anaerobic nitrogen oxidation, where these ammonia gas is produced and also there is a release of water. So, overall these processes include nitrification, denitrification, assimilation and ammonification, where different kinds of bacteria are involved. So, in nitrification, ammonium is converted by bacteria and archaea into nitrates and then nitrates. In denitrification, nitrites and nitrates are found in water and the soil. Some of these are converted back into nitrogen gas by bacteria, which is released into the atmosphere. In assimilation, plants and other producers directly use ammonium and nitrates to make organic molecules, and in ammonification, microorganisms such as bacteria, fungi decompose the waste and dead tissues to produce ammonium. In marine ecosystems, nitrogen compounds created by bacteria or through decomposition collects in the ocean floor sediments. It can be removed or transported to land or moved to land in a geologic time, which will be a very long time event, by uplift of Earth's crust and thereby incorporate into the terrestrial rock. The movement of nitrogen from rock directly into living systems has been considered to be insignificant compared with nitrogen fixed from the atmosphere. But a recent study has showed that this process may indeed be significant and should be included in the study of global nitrogen cycle. Viruses also play a role in marine nitrogen cycle. So, this review in 2022 sum up the synthesis of viral contributing to marine nitrogen cycling. Here basically due to limitations of sampling scales and research methods, the role of virus in marine nitrogen cycle is not well understood. Broadly, virus fundamentally influence nitrogen recycling by inducing microbial motility, and they also constitute a noteworthy part of marine nitrogen inventory. Viruses regulate biogeochemical nitrogen metabolism in host via controlling auxiliary metabolic gene expression. Human activity can also alter nitrogen cycle by two ways. Number one, the combustion of fossil fuels, which releases different nitrogen oxides into the atmosphere, and by the use of artificial fertilizers in agriculture. Atmospheric nitrogen other than nitrogen gas is associated with several effects on Earth's ecosystem. Nitrogen oxides react with atmospheric water vapor to form nitric acid, which is a key component of acid rain, which can damage ecosystems and buildings or building materials like marble and stones, and also affect human health. So, like carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide causes global warming resulting in the climate change. So, another human intervention which alter the nitrogen cycle is the application of fertilizers, which are washed into lakes, streams and rivers by surface runoff, resulting in salt water and freshwater eutrophication, a process whereby nutrient runoff causes the overgrowth of algae and depletion of oxygen and death of aquatic fauna. So, there are harmful algal blooms, dead zones and fish kills, which happens due to the result of this eutrophication. This begins with the increased load of nutrients to estuaries and coastal waters. For example, the Mississippi River carries millions of tons of nutrient-rich sediment into the Gulf each year, and thereby this also plays a havoc. So, here you can see dead fish killed by toxins or oxygen depletion in a lake in Iowa called Lake Binder, and these picture here taken in 2007 illustrates the severe eutrophication of Diansy Lake as a result of polluted runoff. Diansy is China's 5th largest freshwater lake, but its water is undrinkable because of severe pollution, which has led to persistent algal blooms and hypoxia. Let us now discuss about the phosphorus cycle. Several forms of nitrogen such as nitrogen gas, ammonia and nitrates are involved in the nitrogen cycle, while phosphorus mainly exists in the form of phosphate ion in the phosphorus cycle. Unlike the nitrogen cycle, phosphorus has no gaseous form in the atmosphere. Phosphorus is essential for the synthesis of nucleic acids and phospholipids, which are key components of biological membranes. Rocks serve as a major reservoir for phosphorus, much of which originates from ocean sediments. Phosphate containing ocean sediments form primarily from the remains and excretion of the marine organisms. In addition, volcanic ash, aerosols and mineral dust can also contribute phosphates. Over geological time, these sediments are moved to land through the uplifting of Earth's surface. The movement of phosphate from the ocean to land and through the soil is extremely slow, as in the case of nitrogen we discussed, with the average phosphate ion having residence time in the ocean of 20,000 to 100,000 years. The weathering of rocks release phosphates into the soil and bodies of water. Plants assimilate phosphates in the soil and incorporate it into organic molecules, making phosphorus available to consumers in terrestrial food webs. Waste and dead organisms are decomposed by fungi and bacteria, releasing phosphates back into the soil. Some phosphate is leached from the soil, entering into rivers, lakes and the oceans. Primary producers in aquatic food webs such as algae and photosynthetic bacteria assimilate phosphate, making organic phosphate available to consumers in aquatic food webs. Similar to terrestrial food webs, phosphorus is reciprocally exchanged between phosphate dissolved in the ocean and organic phosphorus in marine organisms. So, this is the phosphorus cycle where we can see the geological uplifting from the ocean bed. It goes up to the rock due to geological events. Mostly it remains in rocks, which may again form due to sedimentation from the solution phase, as we can see over here, and the phosphate in soil is also leached out to this aquatic phase, and then it may be sedimented, and then it is mostly released from the weathering of phosphate from the rocks, and then these are directly taken up by plants and made available to animals, and then also the decomposers release them back into the soil. So, basically there is weathering, then there is absorption by plants and absorption by elements, and then return to the ecosystem by the decomposers. The movement of phosphorus from rock to living organism is typically a slow process, as we have already discussed, but human activities can accelerate this cycle. Phosphate bearing rocks are often mined by humans for use in fertilizers and detergents, which significantly speed up the phosphorus cycle. Additionally, runoff from agricultural land and the release of sewage into water systems can lead to local phosphate overloads. The increased availability of phosphate can stimulate excessive algal growth, which depletes oxygen level, leading to again problems like eutrophication and the disruption of the aquatic system, and lead to maybe fish kill. Another important cycle is the sulfur cycle. Sulfur is an essential element for living beings. It is a key component of molecules like proteins, where it helps in the formation of disulfide bonds, and it is critical to three-dimensional structure of the proteins. Atmospheric sulfur primarily exists as sulfur dioxide, which enters the atmosphere through three main processes: by the decomposition of organic matter, then there is a volcanic activity and geothermal vents, and the burning of fossil fuels by humans. So, this is the sulfur cycle. So, you can see the volcanic release and then also release by weathering, then terrestrial biology uptake and release. These all leach out to the water bodies, and there also we have sulphate mineral formation, and there is sulphate uplift as we can see, or it may also go for subduction as you can see over here. And then there is a marine biology uptake release by certain organisms, and there is also sinking over here. Then we have these organic sulfur burial in many cases, and these are also released undersea by hydrothermal vent release, and there is the atmospheric uptake and decomposition. This is overall the sulfur cycle. So, on land, sulfur is deposited in 4 main ways: by precipitation, atmospheric fallout, rock weathering and geothermal vents. Atmospheric sulfur is primarily found as sulfur dioxide. As rain falls through the atmosphere, sulfur is dissolved and forms weak sulfuric acid. Sulfur can also fall directly from the atmosphere in a process known as fallout. Additionally, when sulfur containing rocks weather, sulfur is released into the soil. These rocks often originate from ocean sediments that are uplifted to land through geologic processes. Once in the soil, sulfur is converted into sulfate, which plants take up through their roots. When plants die and decompose, sulfur is released back into the atmosphere as hydrogen sulfide gas, thereby completing the cycle. So, human activities have played a major role in altering the balance of the global sulfur cycle. The burning of large quantities of fossil fuels, especially from coal, releases sulfur dioxide, which reacts with the atmosphere to form sulfuric acid. Like nitric acid, sulfuric acid contributes to the acid deposition. Now, let us discuss about the role of microbes in biogeochemical cycles. So, we know about the various biogeochemical cycles, and microbes are very vital to these various cycles, whereby they facilitate the movement and transformation of essential nutrients in the ecosystem. For example, in the carbon cycle, microbes decompose organic matter, release carbon dioxide through respiration, and ferment organic matter into methane. Cyanobacteria and algae also fix carbon via photosynthesis. In the nitrogen cycle, certain bacteria such as Rhizobium fix atmospheric nitrogen into ammonia. Others like Nitrosomonas and Nitrobacter convert ammonia into nitrates, while denitrifying bacteria return nitrogen to the atmosphere by converting nitrates back into nitrogen gas. In the sulfur cycle, microbes decompose organic matter, releasing sulfur compounds, and can oxidize hydrogen sulfide to elemental sulfur and sulfate. Some bacteria also reduce sulfates back to hydrogen sulfide. In the phosphorus cycle, microbial decomposition releases phosphorus from organic compounds, and some microbes can solubilize phosphate from rocks, making it available for plants. While in the water cycle, microbial communities filter and purify water in soil and aquatic systems, influencing water quality and nutrient cycling. All these biogeochemical cycles work independently of one another, but they are also interconnected in several ways. For example, the nitrogen cycle interacts with the carbon cycle, as nitrogen availability influences plant productivity and consequently carbon sequestration. The water cycle, water acts as a medium for transporting nutrients and elements through other cycles. So, it is very, very essential. The functioning of other cycles dependent on the water cycle. It affects the availability of nitrogen, phosphorus in soils and aquatic systems through leaching and runoff. When it goes to carbon cycle, carbon is fundamental building block of life and closely tied to the oxygen cycle, photosynthesis and respiration. And the carbon compounds are cycled through various forms in the atmosphere, lithosphere and biosphere, influencing global temperatures and climate. Similarly, the sulfur compounds are involved in protein synthesis and contribute to the acidification of soils and water bodies. The sulfur cycle can affect nitrogen cycle, as sulfur dioxide from volcanic eruptions can lead to nitrogen mobilization in the ecosystems. And when it comes to the phosphorus cycle, while these cycle, phosphorus do not cycle through the atmosphere like carbon and nitrogen, phosphorus availability influences biological productivity, particularly in aquatic systems, and thereby it will decide the cycling of the nitrogen and carbon and sulfur. So, what is the relationship of biogeochemical cycles and health of ecosystem or ecology? It is a very fundamental relationship, because these cycles define the interactions and processes that sustain ecosystems. So, let us look into how biogeochemical cycles define ecology. Number one, they define nutrient availability. Biogeochemical cycle regulate the flow of essential nutrients like carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus and sulfur, which are crucial for growth and reproduction of organisms. The availability of these nutrients directly influence primary productivity and the structure of food webs. They also dictate ecosystem functioning. The cycling of nutrients supports various ecological processes such as decomposition, primary production and energy transfer. For example, the nitrogen cycle affects plant growth, which in turn supports herbivores and higher trophic level. They support biodiversity. Different ecosystems have varying nutrient dynamics influenced by biogeochemical cycles. For instance, nutrient environments often support greater biodiversity, while poor nutrient systems may limit the type of species that can thrive. It dictates the energy flow. Biogeochemical cycles facilitate the flow of energy through ecosystem. For instance, the carbon cycle enables photosynthesis in plants, which captures solar energy and converts it into chemical energy, forming the basis of food chains. Then certain environmental conditions are influenced. The cycle influences physical and chemical conditions within the ecosystem such as soil, pH, moisture and temperature. These factors in turn affect the types of organisms that can survive and flourish in a given habitat. So, any kind of imbalance in these cycles will thereby result in a non-healthy ecosystem, and it will also result in ecosystem disservice, as we have discussed earlier. Now, let us look from the other way how ecology influences biogeochemical cycles. The organisms and their activities have a huge impact on the ecology, biogeochemical cycles. The activities of organisms such as decomposition by microbes and nitrogen fixation by bacteria directly affect the rates and pathways of biogeochemical cycles. For example, the decomposition process recycles nutrients back into the soil, making them available for plant uptake. There are species interactions or ecological interactions such as competition, predation and symbiosis, which influence nutrient recycling. For instance, mycorrhizal fungi form symbiotic relations with plant roots, enhancing nutrient uptake and altering soil nutrient dynamics. So, there is habitat modifications by organisms who modify their environments in ways that affect biogeochemical cycles. For example, beavers create wetlands that influence the hydrological cycle and nutrient retention, impacting surrounding ecosystems. Then there is a response to environmental changes. Ecosystems respond to changes in environmental conditions like climate change, pollution by altering the rates of biogeochemical cycles. For instance, increased temperature can accelerate decomposition rates, leading to higher carbon release into the atmosphere. So, the global warming will be impacted. So, here this is a report on the global warming which accelerates soil heterotrophic respiration. Finally, let us discuss about the impact of humans. Human activities such as agriculture, urbanization and pollution significantly impacts both biogeochemical cycles and ecological integrity. For example, the use of fertilizers and pesticides affect the nitrogen and phosphorus cycles, leading to nutrient runoff and eutrophication in the aquatic systems. So, there are now reports such as these where excessive application of chemical fertilizer, pesticides have induced total phosphorus loss from planting, causing surface water eutrophication. So, with this we come to end of this lecture. Thank you for your patient hearing.